Hello, this is Amin, and you are watching session 15 of ASP.NET Core tutorial. In this session, we are going to talk about models. If you remember, in session 14, we described the controller and passing value to controller. And also in session 10, we described the MVC design pattern. And if you haven't watched those sessions, I highly recommend watching those sessions before starting this session. This video series, we are trying to implement a web application that store daily cost of each person, and you can store, for example, the cost for payment of grocery or payment for bills or any payment that you are doing during the day. We need some entity and some models. As in this session, we are talking about models. We create first model of this web application, which is related to cost entity. Cost entity has 5 different fields: ID, date, amount, category, and comment. Also, for doing CRUD operations, we need a repository. And during this session, we create a repository plus model. Also, we will show you how you can use that repository in your controller. That's why we need to create a class with name of cost with field that I mentioned in previous slide, and also I need one interface and one class for repository. So I will describe why we need interface and repository both, and the reason of creating interface and repository, and it is related to dependency injection, and we describe dependency injection in detail in further session. Let's flip to Visual Studio and create or required classes. This is the project that we have been working throughout this video series, and I start with creating my model in models folder. Just I want to mention that there is no mandate to create your models repository and interface within models folder, and you can create it anywhere within your project. But for better file structure and file organization, it is better to create your model and its related repository and interface within models folder. I create one class and I call it cost.cs, and within this class I create my required field. I can create a property for this class with abbreviation prob and press tab key twice, and I have ints for ID, and also I have decimal for amount. I will have date time for date, and also I will have a string for comment. Also, I need one more field with type of a string for storing a category, and let me change it to capital. And this is my cost model. The next step, I should add one interface for CRUD operation. Within interface, I declare the method that I implement in my repository. And if you have this question why I should add interface and then implement my repository from the interface, I will describe it in the further session that I will talk about dependency injection. I will have iCost repository.cs. Let me make it public. Within the interface, I just declare the method that I need in my repository. For now, I just add one declaration, and during this video tutorial, I will add more declaration for CRUD operation. but the first one is the declaration of method which related to return a cost by a provided ID, and it has one input parameters which is ID, and then I will create one class for repository. I call it a static cost repository, and this class will implement it from iCost repository, and as you can see, it has one red line behind iCost repository because I haven't implemented the required method within my repository. And for implementing the method, I can press Control period and implement my repository within this repository file. But as I haven't created required database for now, I should add my records in a static way, and I hard-coded them. I will create a private object of cost, and it should be list of costs, and I call it cost equal new list of costs, and I add some data within this list to have some records in cost model. Here I just create a list of cost model and add some rows to this field, and within the get cost by ID method I return cost dot first for default, and with lambda expression I set for ID which is equal this ID. And now I created the required class for cost model, and let me go to controller class. For having access to the repository that I created, I should inject it within my controller. For this purpose, I should inject it in a constructor of this controller. For creating constructor, you can use CTOR abbreviation and press tab twice, and it's automatically create the constructor for my class. And within this constructor, I inject iCost repository, and I need to add its namespace. And for this purpose, I press Control period key, and it is in daily cost web application model namespace, and I add it. Now I need one private object of cost repository, but also I can add the private object with control period key while you are in input parameters, and you can create a field for this purpose. And now I inject iCost repository to my controller, and now I change result of this action method to iActionResult, and I change its name to detail. Normally in MVC, we should use view for result of my action method, but as we haven't go through view yet, I use JSON result for this action method now, and I use my repository, and I want to have access to get cost by ID. For now, I hard-coded the ID and use ID1, and I expect to receive related information of ID1 in cost table and entity. Let me run the project, and let me browse to cost and detail action method. I received one unhandled exception error, and it is related to iCost repository, and it is mentioned that the service is not added. For solving this issue, I should add the iCost repository to services, and for this purpose, I should go to a startup class, and here I should determine the repository that I want to use iCost repository. For now, I have just one repository, a static cast repository, and which implemented from iCast repository. But we can have several repository from one interface. And for determining to the web app which repository is mapped to the iCast repository or the interface for time being, we should add it with services. We have several type of adding services: add singleton, or add scoped, or add transient. But I will describe it in further videos, what is different between add singleton, add transient, and add scoped. But for now, I use add singleton, and I should connect iCast repository, and first I should add its namespace, which is in daily cast web application models, and then name of repository that I want to map to the iCast repository. For now, I have just one repository, a static cast repository, and with these changes I built my project once more and go to cast and detail action method. As expected, I received the information of ID1, and I have its date and comment and category and amount. In this video, we created a model and an interface for that model and a repository which implemented from the created interface, and we see how you can inject our interface to our controller and use our repository within our controller. That's in this video. Don't forget to subscribe this channel and follow us on social media channel. Thank you for watching us.